So we use our bodies to make what for us as Christians is now a symbol which has become, unless you live in the Middle East, it's lost its shock value. But we've turned that into a beautiful piece of jewelry. But that's not a beautiful piece of jewelry. That's a horrific method of execution, which Jesus embraced as a way to display God's love. And so we sign ourselves as Catholics with the sign of the cross because the cross is the instrument with which Jesus conquered hell and routed Satan and made possible our salvation. Even in things like the Old Testament, so some of us who know Scripture, this might be familiar. Others of us, it's okay. We'll get to it later. We'll talk about this next week when we talk a little bit about an event in the Old Testament which is central, which helps us understand the Mass. But the Jewish people at a particular time in their history, when God was breaking into their lives powerfully, were instructed by God to make a sign on their doorposts with blood, animal blood. And the sign, by the time it was done being made, would look an awful lot like a cross on the threshold of their houses. That's actually something that helps us understand this. I do this on the front of my body to show that this person is claimed by the cross of Jesus. And he's my Lord. Okay? I'll tell you a quick story on that. I have a friend of mine who used to do some work in Saudi Arabia where it's forbidden to practice Christianity, except for this one little, American enclave which they allow, but you cannot build a church in Saudi Arabia. And so those who live there, who are native there, cannot openly practice the faith. And so he was involved in doing some expatriate work over there. And he would come in every couple of months, and they would smuggle priests into the country. So they'd get a priest in every 4 or 5 months. And the priest would come in, and when he came, they would have baptisms, weddings, mass, confessions. And because of the fact that they were watched, they had to do it all clandestinely. And so there would be signs to tip people off. So this guy would drive the priest. That was his responsibility. And so he'd be driving through the town or whatnot. He'd have one guy in his car, another guy'd have another guy in his car. And there would be lookouts. And, maybe the sign was a guy on a phone on a corner. The guy had his phone on the corner, that meant keep going, they know you're here. Or if the guy didn't have his phone up, it meant we're safe, we can get together. And then if it was safe, they would get together and they would celebrate Mass. So this guy was at an event one time, and there was a guy there who didn't have a right hand. And so he asked him, he says, can I ask what happened? And the guy smiled at him. He says, yeah, I lost my hand. And then he says, actually, it was taken from me. And he says, what happened? And he says, well, I was reported for having publicly done this to the police. And they arrested him, brought him down to the police station, and said, you were seen publicly making the sign of the cross. So either tell us that you will never do that again, or we will make it so that you cannot. And the man went, and he lost his hand. I try to think of him every time I do this. So our gestures, though we might take them for granted, are done by brothers and sisters in other parts of the world where, trust me, they do not take them for granted. And they may actually end up on one of those